He was the only son of a billionaire. At just 7 years old, Ethan was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive illness that no amount of money could cure. Doctors said the same thing every time. We've done all we can. He has only 3 months left to live. No treatment worked. No medicine brought hope. And as the days passed, his father, Mr. Callahan, watched helplessly as his little boy grew weaker in front of his eyes. Mr. Callahan was a man who had everything: companies, influence, power. Yet none of it could buy him what he wanted most: his son's life. He brought in specialists from all over the world, paying millions for therapies, experimental drugs, and private hospitals. But with every test and injection, hope kept fading. Each time a doctor walked into the room, the silence spoke louder than words. The hospital had become their second home. Machines beeped quietly beside Ethan's bed. The boy's once bright eyes were now tired, but he never stopped smiling when his father entered. Even when he could barely speak, he whispered, "Dad, I'm okay, don't be sad." Those words broke Mr. Callahan more than the diagnosis ever could. He would sit beside his son's bed every night, holding his small hand, reading stories, or pretending to laugh at cartoons, even when his own heart was falling apart. Behind that strength was a guilt he never shared. Ethan's mother, Grace, had died while giving birth to him, and now, losing his son too felt like a punishment he couldn't escape. He often stood by the window of the hospital room, staring at the city lights, wondering why fate was so cruel. Then, one quiet morning, Ethan asked the one thing his father didn't expect. He didn't ask about medicine. He didn't ask if he would get better. He said softly, "Dad, can I still have a birthday party?" Mr. Callahan froze. The boy's birthday was just 3 weeks away. Ethan continued, "I just want balloons, cake, and music. Just one party where everyone smiles." Tears filled his father's eyes, but he smiled through them. "Of course, son," he whispered. "It'll be the best birthday ever." That very day, he started making calls. He spoke to the doctors, nurses, even the school. Everyone wanted to help. If this was to be Ethan's last birthday, it would be one he'd never forget. Days passed quickly. The mansion, which had been silent for months, suddenly came alive again. Decorators arrived with purple and gold balloons, Ethan's favorite colors. Cakes were ordered. Lights were strung across the living room. But in all that planning, one person stayed quietly in the background: Maria, the family maid. She had worked in the Callahan mansion since Ethan was a baby. At first, she was just another employee, hired to clean and cook. But when Mrs. Callahan died, Maria became much more. She was the one who stayed awake at night when the child cried, the one who taught him how to tie his shoes, who packed his lunch, who kissed his forehead when he was afraid of the dark. She had no children of her own, but Ethan had filled that empty space in her heart. And to Ethan, she wasn't the maid. She was Mama Maria. Mr. Callahan noticed the bond between them, but he never said much. He was grateful, even if he didn't show it. Maria brought warmth into a house that had long been frozen by grief. She made the mansion feel alive again, not with noise, but with kindness. As Ethan's condition worsened, she stayed close by his side, reading stories and praying quietly when no one else was around. And deep inside, Maria made a silent promise. "I couldn't save my sister years ago, but I'll do everything to save this child." She had lost someone to illness before. She knew the pain too well. So when the doctor said Ethan had only 3 months left, she didn't give up. She couldn't, because sometimes love doesn't wait for permission to fight back. That was the day everything began to change. Ethan's birthday was coming soon, and the miracle no one believed in was already on its way. The mansion glowed that weekend. The birthday decorations were still up, the air filled with faint traces of frosting and laughter that echoed just days before. But beneath the beauty of the moment, sorrow still lingered, a truth no balloon could hide. Ethan's birthday had been magical. He wore a soft blue suit, a little too big for his small frame, and a golden paper crown that kept slipping sideways. He laughed until his tiny lungs hurt, hugged every friend who came, and blew out the candles with a smile so bright it made every adult in the room tear up. He had made a wish, but he never told anyone what it was. When the guests left and the lights dimmed, Maria helped him into bed. His voice was faint, but his words were clear. "Mama Maria, I made a wish tonight." She smiled, brushing his hair gently. "And what did you wish for, my boy?" He looked up with tired eyes. "I wish to stay here a little longer." Maria's chest tightened. She held his small hand, whispering, "You will, sweetheart, you will." But deep down, she feared otherwise. That night, long after everyone slept, Maria sat by the window in her small room, staring into the darkness. Her heart was heavy, but something in her refused to give up. She whispered to herself, "I won't let him go, not without a fight." Over the following days, Ethan's condition worsened. His skin grew pale, his voice weaker, and even the simple act of breathing seemed painful. The doctors came often, speaking in quiet tones to Mr. Callahan outside the room. Maria could see the change in the father, too. He looked older, as if every day stole a piece of his strength. He stopped going to the office entirely and spent most nights sitting beside his son, just watching him sleep. But while everyone else was preparing for the end, Maria began preparing for a miracle. Every night, after her chores, she sat with an old laptop she kept in the kitchen drawer. She started reading, searching, learning. She looked up treatments, hospitals in other countries, and experimental therapies that hadn't reached the public yet. At first, it was just desperation, but then she stumbled upon something that made her heart race. It was a case study about a new form of blood treatment, one that had saved a child with symptoms almost identical to Ethan's. It wasn't approved yet in their country, but the article said it could work with a genetic match. She didn't fully understand the medical terms, but one thing stood out: a living donor with compatible blood and DNA markers. Maria froze, her hands trembling. Could she be that match? The next day, while cleaning Ethan's room, she noticed his medical file on the table, the one the nurse had left open. Inside, she saw his blood type. O positive. Her heart stopped. That was her blood type, too. She backed away slowly, her mind racing. Could this be fate? Was she given this job for a reason beyond just cleaning rooms and serving food? She thought of her sister, the one she couldn't save years ago because their family was too poor to afford medicine. She still remembered holding her hand as she faded away, whispering, "I'm sorry I couldn't help you." Now, another child she loved was slipping away in front of her, and she swore she wouldn't let history repeat itself. That night, she went to the hospital alone after her shift. She asked a lab technician on duty for a blood test, pretending it was for her own checkup. He smiled politely and drew the sample. 2 days later, she returned to collect the result. When the technician handed her the paper, her knees almost gave way. Perfect match. She stood frozen in the hallway, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope burning inside her chest. She clutched the paper tightly and whispered, "Thank you. God, give me the strength to do this." But she knew what it meant. Donating a portion of her blood for an unapproved treatment wasn't simple. It was risky, possibly even fatal. She could lose her job, her health, or worse. Still, she couldn't ignore the pull in her heart. Over the next few days, she visited clinics quietly, talking to anyone who would listen, doctors, nurses, even pharmacists, learning how it could be done safely. Most turned her away. One told her she was foolish. But one older nurse finally stopped her as she was leaving and said softly, "If love is driving you, child, then you've already found your cure." Back at the mansion, Mr. Callahan noticed a change in Maria. She moved differently now, quieter, more focused. Sometimes, he found her whispering prayers near Ethan's room. One evening, he confronted her gently. "Maria, you've been restless lately. Are you hiding something?" She smiled faintly. "No, sir, just praying a little harder." He sighed, looking at his son through the glass door. If prayers could save him, he'd be running by now. Maria met his gaze and said quietly, "Maybe prayers are what will make that happen." That night, as the mansion fell silent, Maria packed a small bag and slipped out the back door. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She had made her choice. If no one else would try to save Ethan, she would. And before dawn, she was already on a bus headed for the city hospital, the place where a secret procedure could change everything. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of living with regret. In the quiet light of morning, while the world still slept, Maria whispered a promise that would change all their lives forever. If it costs me everything, I'll give him another chance to live. The city was still dark when Maria reached the hospital. She sat quietly in the waiting area, clutching the small folder that held her medical report, the one that proved she was a perfect match for Ethan. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from urgency. Every hour mattered now. When the doctor finally arrived, she stood quickly. "Please," she said softly, "I need your help. A little boy is dying, and I might be able to save him." The doctor looked at her, confused. "Are you a relative?" Maria hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "No, but he's like my own child." The doctor sighed. "Without parental consent, we can't." Maria interrupted, her voice trembling but determined. "Then let me sign whatever you need. I'll take responsibility. Just test the procedure on me first if you must." Her words hung in the air. The doctor saw the desperation in her eyes, and something in him softened. He didn't promise anything, but he agreed to help quietly. They scheduled the blood extraction and plasma separation for that same day. As she changed into the hospital gown, Maria's hands shook, not from fear or pain, but from the weight of what she was about to do. The nurse beside her asked gently, "Are you sure about this? You might not wake up feeling the same." Maria smiled faintly. "If he wakes up feeling better, that's all that matters." When the procedure began, she whispered Ethan's name under her breath like a prayer. Hours passed. Tubes ran, machines beeped, and her vision began to blur. Somewhere between consciousness and sleep, she thought she heard a voice, soft, like a child's whisper. "Thank you, Mama Maria." Back at the mansion, Mr. Callahan woke up to find Maria gone. Her room was empty, her bed neatly folded, and her uniform hanging on the chair. He frowned, confused. The housekeeper said she left before dawn, saying she had something important to do. He didn't think much of it until he went to Ethan's room. The boy's condition had worsened overnight. His breathing was shallow, his pulse weak. The doctors were preparing for the worst. Mr. Callahan stood by the bed, gripping his son's hand tightly. "I can't lose you two," he whispered. "Please, God, not again." Hours later, Maria returned to mansion. She was pale, exhausted, and barely able to walk, but she smiled through her weakness. She went straight to the nursery. Ethan lay motionless, connected to several monitors. Maria sat beside him and touched his hand gently. "You're not alone," she whispered. "I gave you a little part of me, so you'll never be alone again." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Ethan's tiny fingers twitched. Maria froze, her breath catching. The monitor beside the bed beeped, once, then again, stronger this time. The nurse gasped. "His oxygen levels, they're rising." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "It's working," she whispered. By evening, Ethan was sitting up for the first time in weeks. He smiled weakly and whispered, "Mama Maria." Mr. Callahan stood at the doorway, frozen. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He turned to the doctor beside him. "How is this possible?" The doctor hesitated. "It's extraordinary, sir. His body's responding like it's been given new strength. Almost like he received a living transfusion." The billionaire frowned, his heart racing. "From who?" The doctor looked uneasy. "We don't know yet, but it wasn't from our staff." Mr. Callahan's eyes darted toward Maria, who sat quietly holding Ethan's hand. That night, as the mansion grew quiet, Mr. Callahan went to find her. He found Maria sitting alone on the garden bench, her arms wrapped in bandages. He stopped, realizing what she had done. His voice shook. "It was you, wasn't it?" Maria didn't turn to face him. "He's your son, sir. He deserves a chance to live." "You risked your life," he said softly. "Why?" She finally turned toward him. Tears glistened in her tired eyes. "Because love doesn't ask whose child it is. It just saves them." Mr. Callahan sat beside her, speechless. He had spent his whole life believing money could fix anything, But this woman, this quiet maid, had done what no wealth could buy. He looked up at the night sky and whispered, "You gave me back my son." Maria smiled faintly. "No, sir, he was never gone. He just needed a bit of love to find his way back." The next morning, Ethan woke up stronger. His skin had color again. His laughter returned, filling the house like sunlight. When Mr. Callahan entered the room, the boy reached out and said, "Dad, can Mama Maria come live with us forever?" The billionaire's voice broke as he nodded. "Yes, son, forever." From that day, Maria wasn't called a maid anymore. She was called family, and though she never asked for recognition or reward, she had already received something greater, the sound of a child's laughter that she helped bring back to life. But the miracle wasn't over yet, because soon the truth of what she had done and the risk she had taken would spread far beyond that mansion's walls. And when the world found out, it would leave even the billionaire in tears. For days after the miracle, the mansion felt alive again. Laughter returned to its cold walls, sunlight poured through windows, and for the first time in months, Ethan's smile became the center of every morning. He could now walk short distances on his own. The boy who once lay silent on a hospital bed now ran across the living room, holding his little toy plane, giggling as Maria chased after him with a blanket, pretending it was a cape. Every sound of his laughter made Mr. Callahan pause. It was like hearing life come back after long silence. He would stand by the doorway, watching them, the woman who had worked in his house for years and the son who once had no hope. He couldn't deny it anymore. It wasn't medicine that brought Ethan back. It was love. That evening, as the sun set, Mr. Callahan called Maria into his study. The air was quiet, the kind that makes every word heavy. Maria stood by the door, still unsure how to act around him after everything that had happened. "Sit down," he said softly. She hesitated for a moment, then sat, folding her hands in her lap. Mr. Callahan's voice was calm, but his eyes were full of questions. "I know what you did," he began. "The doctors confirmed it this morning." Maria's heart sank. "Sir, I only want to help." He interrupted, his tone breaking. "Help? You saved him, Maria." He took a deep breath and looked away for a moment, trying to steady his emotions. Then he turned back to her, his voice trembling. "You gave part of yourself to my son without asking for anything in return. Why didn't you tell me?" Maria's eyes lowered. "Because I didn't want you to stop me. I wasn't doing it for praise or money. I did it because I couldn't watch him fade away when I knew I could help." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For years, Mr. Callahan had lived believing that money could solve everything, that power could buy life, happiness, or loyalty. But this woman had proved him wrong with nothing more than kindness. He leaned back in his chair, covering his face with one hand. "You've taught me something I should have learned long ago," he whispered. "You've shown me what true wealth really means." The next morning, Mr. Callahan made a decision that shocked everyone. He called for a meeting with the hospital board and arranged a large donation in Maria's name, not as charity, but as gratitude. The funds were set to help children battling the same illness Ethan had survived. When Maria heard the news, she was speechless. "Sir, you didn't have to." He smiled softly. "You gave me back my world. The least I can do is help others find theirs." Days turned into weeks, and Ethan continued to recover. One afternoon, he sat on the garden swing beside Maria, his small fingers tangled around hers. "Mommy Maria," he said, "will you still stay with us when I grow up?" Maria smiled and brushed his hair gently. "If life allows me to, Ethan, I'll always be right here." Behind them, Mr. Callahan stood by the window, watching silently. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt peace. He had lost so much, but through one woman's selfless act, he had found meaning again. Weeks later, the story leaked to the press. A nurse who had witnessed Maria's quiet sacrifice told the tale to a journalist. At first, the Callahan family wanted privacy, but soon the story spread like wildfire. "The maid who saved the billionaire's son," the headlines read. People across the city wept as they watched the interviews. Reporters camped outside the mansion, eager to see the woman who had risked her life without hesitation. When asked how she found the courage, Maria simply said, "You don't think about courage when it's someone you love. You just act." Her humility touched hearts everywhere. Messages pouring from around the world. People offering help, blessings, and even scholarship for Ethan's future. One evening, as the house grew quiet, Mr. Callahan joined Maria in the garden once more. The stars shimmered above them, and the faint sound of crickets filled the air. "I used to think my wealth made me powerful," he said quietly, "but I was wrong. Power means nothing without compassion." Maria smiled faintly. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what really matters." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Thank you for showing me that." They sat there in silence, two souls who had walked through grief and come out with hope. As Ethan's laughter echoed from the balcony, Mr. Callahan turned to Maria and said something that would change everything. "From today, you're not just part of this house. You are this family." Tears filled Maria's eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, sir." He shook his head softly. "No, Maria, it's me who should be thanking you." That night, the mansion lights glowed brighter than ever before. Not from luxury, but from love. The house that was once filled with sorrow now stood as a symbol of second chances and human kindness. And for the first time, Maria looked up at the stars and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for herself, but for the little boy she had saved and the father she had healed. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't survival, it's transformation. Months passed, and Ethan's recovery became nothing short of a miracle. The doctors who once gave him 3 months to live could hardly believe what they saw. His blood tests improved, his strength returned, and soon he was back in school, running, laughing, and living like every other child. Mr. Callahan never missed a school day again. He would sit quietly at the back during events, watching his son stand tall, smiling and full of life. Each time Ethan waved from the stage, tears would form in his father's eyes. Tears of gratitude, not pain. Maria still worked in the mansion, but things were different now. She wasn't treated as an employee. She was treated as family. Her room was moved closer to Ethan's, and her name was no longer the Maid. Everyone called her Aunt Maria. There was a quiet dignity about her, the kind that came from love, freely given and returned. When visitors came to the house, Mr. Callahan proudly introduced her. "This is Maria," he would say, "the woman who gave me back my son." She would always smile shyly and change the topic, but inside, her heart glowed with peace. One Sunday afternoon, Mr. Callahan gathered everyone in the garden, Ethan, Maria, the staff, and even the doctors who had treated his son. He stood before them with a small smile and said, "I've spent most of my life building wealth and power. But this," he looked at his son, "this is my real fortune. And the woman standing beside him is the reason I still have it." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "There are things money can buy, and there are things only the heart can give. Maria taught me that love is the greatest medicine of all." The crowd applauded softly, some with tears in their eyes. That day, he announced the opening of the Maria Foundation for Children, a charity dedicated to helping families with children facing life-threatening illnesses. Maria tried to protest, but he only smiled and said, "You gave your life to save one child. Let this foundation save thousands more in your name." As the years went by, the foundation grew beyond anything they could imagine. Hospitals began naming children's wards after Maria. Her story traveled far, on television, in newspapers, and across the internet. People called it the miracle of a maid's heart. But to Maria, it wasn't a miracle. It was simply love, quiet, simple, and true. On Ethan's 10th birthday, the garden was once again filled with laughter, balloons, and music. The same garden that once held tears now echoed with joy. As Ethan blew out his candles, he made a wish. Mr. Callahan leaned over and asked, "What did you wish for, son?" Ethan grinned. "I wish that one day I can save someone too, just like Mommy Maria saved me." Maria froze for a moment, then smiled as her eyes glistened. She reached out and hugged him tightly, whispering, "That's the best wish anyone could make." That night, after everyone went to bed, Maria stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The wind brushed against her face, carrying the distant laughter of the boy she had once feared to lose. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Thank you, God, not for what I gave, but for what I gained." Because in saving a life, she had found her own purpose, and in loving without condition, she had become part of family that no wealth could ever replace. The mansion that was once silent now stood alive with hope. Ethan's laughter filled every hall. Mr. Callahan's smile no longer hid pain, and Maria's gentle presence became the heart of it all. They didn't just survive tragedy. They transformed it into love that would ripple across generations. And so, the story that began with fear ended with faith. The story that began with pain ended with peace. And the woman who once cleaned their floors became the light that rebuilt their world. Because sometimes heroes don't wear crowns or capes. They wear aprons, carry love in silence, and heal the world one heart at a time.